Hey, you all, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, this is Joe and Jay Outspoken. Remember to follow all of our platforms. You can find them by going to Linktree/Joe and Jay Outspoken. We are on Rumble, Locals, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Today's show is for Tuesday, August 15th. I'm Jay, and today Joe and I are going to be going to chat about where we spent our early years in a small town growing up and how it shaped our future, now the present. So, Joe, you ready to go take a trip down memory lane?
Oh, man, I'm so ready. Got so much to talk about. It was like yesterday.
Yes. I feel like a kid again. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We got a little different episode for you here today. Joe and I are going to kind of discuss a little bit of our childhood memories and where we grew up in a small town and where it kind of brought us to where we are today. We're states apart, halfway across the country, right?
Yeah. Well, we actually are across the country. From one extreme to the other, weather-wise, distance-wise, everything, man. You know what I mean?
Everything. East Coast, kind of. You're closer to the East Coast, and I'm closer to the West Coast, but yeah.
They call it Midwest. I don't know how they did that line. It's clearly not in the middle, but
right. You would think it would be Mid-East, you know?
Yeah.
I guess you could say you're in the Middle East, but that would be kind of awkward too,
bro. They already asked me if I am because of my skin color.
Wow.
They're like, hey, are you Lebanese? Mexican. Oh, well, close. How is that close?
Close enough. Close enough.
Like, whatever. Like, yeah, whatever. But just a quick note. There is a huge population of Lebanese living in Mexico. That's where we get those tacos al pastor, the ones that are on that little burner that you shave off. That comes from Lebanon, and we adopted it, and they're called tacos al pastor. Just a little info there for you guys that are not aware.
Info,
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, Joe and I we grew up in the exact same town. All through our youth. We met in like 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
8th grade.
Yeah.
And
because you were in a rival middle school.
I was, yeah.
And then you came to the dark side.
Yeah. Another one of my really good friends. We went to the other middle school together, and then that was our 6th grade year, and then 7th grade he went over to the school that you were already at.
Yeah.
And so I was still stuck at that other school one more year. And I was like, man, this sucks. Cause we were like, really good friends. And then by the time I got over there the next year in 8th grade, I was so happy to be there. Yeah. But it was funny because, I was in band. So we used to travel all over the place, and we ended up going to this parade. And it was funny because all the kids from that other middle school that we were in came over and were saying hi to us because they were like, oh my gosh, we miss you guys.
Yeah.
So, and I've always thought about that with when it comes to schools, really, grade school and everything, you don't have so much of there's not competition right between schools so much. There may be a little bit as far as kids saying it, but when you get into middle school, the football teams and the bands and all that, they actually play one another, right? So there is a rivalry between the schools. And what's funny about that is, so you're usually, 2, 3, 4, depends on how big the city is. You have a ton of these middle schools in the same town. Most of those middle schools, and again, depends on the size of the town, but we were in a small enough town, one high school. We had two middle schools, right?
2 middle schools, yeah.
Yeah, 2 middle schools.
Yeah.
And so eventually those 2 middle schools are going to go to the same high school unless your parents moved or there was another high school that kicked up after you and I.
We were in high school already, though. I think we're like, was it our sophomore year?
Sophomore year.
Yeah.
That new high school kicked open,
And they took
and it
all
was the
the
city
damn-
next door.
And they took all the damn good players too. I remember
Yeah.
we got killed, man.
It
I'm
did,
like,
yeah,
why the division, man?
yeah, and but all those. The point was that those people that are rivals all of a sudden end up at the same place, and now you're together in that school, and now you're rivals with another school that's far away, and then we only had, and I don't even know if I want to call it a college, but we had a college in the area at the time, a little community college.
Yeah.
Community college. And so any of the high schools, obviously they all went to that community college, and they had a football team, and all the other teams that tennis, I think they used to do pretty good at. And I'm trying to think of what other sports and stuff, but
just
anyhow,
so you guys are aware, we were in a school where the sports we played was golf, tennis, water polo. I mean, so we're like, it was like a melting pot of like it was mostly the three majority of people there were white, Mexican, and blacks, right?
yeah,
The
there
majority
wasn't
was
a whole
white,
lot.
clearly, but there was the Mexicans and blacks were the other two, and
Yeah.
that was it, man. It was really much
Yeah.
of a much, and the Patels. I think it was just the Patels. So
yeah, the Patel family. Yeah, that's funny.
Everyone
They were
has a
there.
Patel family. So
Right. And then there was a couple aging kids, but not very many. The school that
yeah,
was
they weren't
down
allowed at our school because of affirmative action. They were not allowed.
they were too smart to come to our school.
Yeah, clearly.
They were gonna mess up the
yeah.
bell curve for us. So,
So yeah,
yeah, but
there's no Mexicans in the water polo team, by the way.
There wasn't.
No, I think there was. No, there was. There was like one or two.
Huh?
There was like one or two. I remember seeing it in my yearbook. I'm like, well, yeah, makes sense.
I just remember a friend in because being in band, and it was like,
band
hey
camp.
man, band camp. Would you want to do water polo? And I'm like, that actually sounds cool. I'm a good swimmer and everything. And then they came back with like all the list of stuff, and they're like, you have to shave your legs. I'm like, heck no, I'm not gonna do water polo.
Bro, I knew a lot of people that did water polo, bro. They shaved their legs, their arms, eyebrows, everything. I'm like, bro, a little aerodynamic. I'm like, nah,
Yeah.
we're good. We're good.
just to be speedier in the water. So
Although
there
was a guy in our football team who I wish would have joined water polo. We named his nickname was Teen Wolf. He had a unibrow.
He was a
had like a
Wookiee.
unibrow, bro. Oh, man, I always wanted just to pluck those middle hairs and like, bro, you got to divide that thing, man. Divide and conquer, bro. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very, very interesting school. I loved that, our school, by the way. It was great.
Our colors for our school were red, white, and blue.
America.
Right? It was when what's cool about this is Joe looks at this from a little bit more of the sports side of things, because he was in football and wrestling and such, and I was in everything: symphonic band, concert band, marching band, jazz band. I did everything. And
marching band. Did you say marching band?
And marching band, yeah, and field shows and all that kind of stuff. So
flags, weren't you on flags? You did flags too?
I was a flag twirler, whatever. So we would go to these tournaments, and I remember one of the years, I don't remember which year it was. I want to say it was our junior year, but we had, I don't know who made this thing. It was this giant flag that went from like I think it was a 30 to the 30-yard line on both sides, all the way down. And the band would be on the field, doing the whole deal. Yeah. And then the color guard and stuff, they would run from the back, and they'd have the flag come completely over us. And it was crazy. And the crowd everybody would stand up and cheer, because,
we did have one of the best bands in the Valley, man. That was the band was awesome. I loved our band. And
yeah, we used to go up against like the best bands in the state,
Yeah.
And there's a difference between high school bands and then when you get into like drum and bugle corps and gosh, what do they call it? it's been so long now, but there, there's a higher end kind of stuff, but we
Yeah.
were as high as you could get for local high school stuff. So it was really cool because our teacher, our band director was, he was like, listen, we're not going to, they recommend because of the amount of students you have, right? So if you have, and some bands had like 30 kids in the in the band program, which was really sad. The sad thing about most of the programs at schools was that there's no funding. And, a lot of kids, their parents, especially in inner cities and stuff, their parents can't afford to buy or even rent an instrument from a music store. So, the schools would try to provide that stuff, especially like, like drums and stuff like that. A parent's not going to buy a bass drum for a kid,
Yeah.
and they're expensive. They're really expensive. And it's not like after you get out of school, you're going to carry around one bass drum and just beat it, So, but
Beat it.
but kids buying like a trumpet or a saxophone or something like that, or renting, they may play that, in later on in life or what have you. But we were lucky enough that our school at that time put money into the music program. The thing that was a big deal for me, between like I know you being in sports and me being in music programs, kids that were in these different kind of programs, it was shown through like all the ASB stuff that they had going on, that kids that were in activities had higher GPAs than kids that didn't have anything to do, because after school or before school, we were busy. We had things that we practice and all kinds of like football. You guys had practice all the time. We had practice all. In fact, we had to fight for the field. Remember? Because
there was no fighting.
Yeah. Because
you guys had that backup field, bro. You had the entire backup field.
We did.
But you mentioned something right now that is kind of what we were talking about. Is you mentioned the programs, right, that the school had at the time. So one thing I want to mention is the difference of back living in a small town and today, because today our town is not considered a small town, right? Even back then, by today's standards, that wouldn't be considered a small town, but it was a small town to us because everyone knew each other, everyone knew everybody, and we knew the teachers. The teachers knew our parents. I mean, our parents actually came to the school. You'd always try to lie about when teacher night was and all that, when parent night was, but they always sent them mails. Back we had real mail that would come to your post office box or to your mailbox at your house.
Mailbox at the house, yeah. We didn't have email back then.
Yeah, no email. And they'd read it, right? And they're like, "Oh, hey, which day are we going?" I'm like, "Damn it!" And I always tried to beat the mailman home, but that dude was on to me. And so they were involved. But one thing I noticed that in today's society, right? Do you remember our classes that we had back there, at least that were offered? So my senior year, I took I think it was called home economics or
home ec, yeah, home ec.
But all you did was cook, right? You learned you basically learn how to be a housewife or a man wife or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And dude, I remember me and one of my linemen in football took that class because we didn't have a first period, right? Because we took, how you were back then, right? You take summer school and you get all your required classes.
That's right. So
when you became a senior, you had like maybe 4 classes, right?
Right. Yeah. You and I both took summer school classes all the way through.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I would come. I didn't have a first period. Second period was home economics class. So the teacher knew we were seniors, and they're like, yeah. And the rest of the class were all female, and they were all freshmen, right? And some sophomore. So me and my buddy would go, and we'd make like chorizo burritos, and we'd eat breakfast, right? We'd cook our breakfast. Teacher would leave us alone. We cook our breakfast, and we'd leave. We were done, right? We're over. It's over. We're overrated this class. We're done. But we had home economics, right? That taught people how to cook, right? How to maintain a home. Not even, it doesn't have to be woman based, but just how to maintain a home. Single man, whatever. Learn how to cook, how to maintain a house, whatever. We had small engines. Remember small engines class, right?
Yeah.
We had drafting, bro. I took mechanical drafting for Christ's sake.
I had mechanical drafting too.
I had to learn how to draw a screw. You know how difficult that was because you had math involved, bro. I was horrible at that. But nowadays, you look, so they were preparing students not only like for a career, college based, university educated based career, but for a technical career as well, right?
Oh yeah,
We had those things back in high school. Do you remember our driving education
yeah.
in a
They don't do
trailer?
that anymore.
It was in
Yeah,
a trailer,
the trailer
on a module,
with the simulators.
bro. Yeah,
The simulators.
We had simulators, bro.
Yeah,
And like, how cool was that? Then when we go drive, I mean, then you had to drive. But I mean, everything was like, to us was like, oh my God, this is so much work, right? But you look back now and you see what they offer in schools now. You're talking about, your transgender story times and all these other crazy shit that's happening out there. And you're like, why did kids were successful? We're talking Generation Xers, right? That's who we are.
yeah.
They become successful. What came out of our generation? Great music, computers, phones, everything came out of our generation, right?
Yeah.
It just minds, bro. They were thinking, like our last episode, we talked about AI, right? And how it's just going to make people stupider. That's what's happening today.
Stupiderist.
Yeah, the stupiderist of them. But even the teachers were more engaging. They weren't really talking about like stupid things, right?
No way.
They'd call you on, you'd be doing stuff and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Come here, and but it was good teaching. It was good learning. They were engaging. They were, it's just, things have changed so much as far as what kind of classes you could take.
Drastically.
Bro, it is like, what are kids learning nowadays in high school? Like, I don't even know anymore. I'm like, the standards, I'm sure, have changed. I'm sure it's, you got the basics of English, math, but I don't know, bro. What's your take on that, man? We grew up together in the school, and you see what's going on now. What's your take on that?
Well, so do you remember? And I know we weren't going to say a lot of names on here, but he's so old. I don't know if he'd even be around anymore. Mr. Adams.
Yep.
He was He was one of the coaches.
Yep.
He
Forever.
also taught consumer math. And I took that class. It was one of the best classes ever. I mean, I took algebra and geometry, and I mean, by the time I got into
Jay was a smart one.
I was not.
I was a muscles. I was a muscles for him.
By the time I got into college, I had to do trig and physics and everything. It was
so what?
But anyways,
to us, what is that consumer math?
So the consumer math. Mr. Adams, I remember him bringing an actual physical, and I think it was his checkbook. I don't know, but he like blew it up and made photocopies so we could like fill out checkbooks and, create a ledger for it. So like every time you did a check, how to fill the ledger out. He did stuff on filling out paperwork for like buying a car and a home, like loan paperwork and, all kinds of stuff. Of course,
real world things.
Yeah, dude. I'm sitting there. We're going over, and I'm trying to. No, I won't say his name, but you know who I'm talking about. He was in that class, and we were laughing and saying that, man, we spent all this time learning sine and cosine and all this other nonsense that we will, and I haven't used since I graduated. And the stuff that was taught in that one class. I've used my entire life, and it's been
buying
really
a house,
important.
Buying a car, whatever the thing.
Yeah. And bro, it's the funny thing is that, I mean, I had a period in my life that my credit score kind of took a dip because I got stupid with credit cards and everything else.
Drugs,
for the last drugs. Yeah. NyQuil, man, I was addicted. But, for the last, I don't even know how many years, man, I remember the first time, gosh, it was in the early 2000s. I got the letter that was you're in the 800 club, for your credit score and all that. And I really, truly believe that everything I got taught in that math class had a lot to do with that because it gave me just enough basis that I knew enough to not go off the deep end and be stupid with, which I did at one time. I kind of got careless for a little while. And, but the difference now is that there's so many things. Well, okay, hold on, put the brakes on for a second. If you look around the world, and you can Google this, and we did this on one of our previous episodes. We had a little clip that was up there that was talking about like the STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, math. We are way down the list in the United States as far as scoring and everything in that. Part of that is because we are teaching nonsensical stuff that doesn't mean anything to anybody as far as getting them prepared to go out into life, into the real world. Let's face it, schooling is to prepare you for one thing, to get a job and be a worker the rest of your life. It truly is. School does not prepare you to be an entrepreneur. The thing that's crazy is you have some Gen Zers and, some millennials that are coming up now that are finding out about things like YouTube and Instagram and OnlyFans and all these other things. And they're making a lot of money because they're becoming entrepreneurs themselves. Now, the only thing is they're stumbling upon it, right? Other people are doing it. They do it. They make some money. The problem is what happens if their channel gets deleted or something happens and they have no backup plan, right? They ditched school. They didn't care about anything else. And they're not prepared for the workforce and they can't get out there. And one of the biggest things that I see a problem with, and a lot of it was the last few years, is that a lot of the younger generation can't communicate with one another. They can be keyboard warriors and get on and, say how everybody else is terrible and ruin their lives and everything, but they can't actually physically hold a conversation with somebody in person, try to go interview for a job or something like that. And it's, really difficult.
Shoot, I think I took Toasters International or something like that? Toastmasters International.
Yeah, I did
just
that
so
too,
I could learn to speak in public because I was like I never had a problem talking in public, but I never was like to sit there and say a speech or something like that. Man, that stuff was awesome. It was great work. But you know what?
It is.
It has changed so much, and you're right about that. There's a lack. There is a barrier. There's something going on where we miss. There's this big gap, and we need to bridge it, right? Because there's a big difference from when our generation we grew up in a small town versus how society is today. We've lost a lot of connection between that. I think one of the biggest things and one of the biggest factors to that is I think like what was one of the reasons that you went to school and you did good in school? It was our parents, right?
Absolutely.
Our parents weren't playing around back in the day.
Yeah.
Like I had like growing up with my parents, we owned small business, right? So I had to get up early and we lived in a ranch. So I get up early in the morning. We had to go feed animals, right? We had to go do that. And then we had to get ready to go to school. We got taken to school because I lived like 5, 6, 7 miles away from our school. Because I didn't want to go to that school. That was our rival school. I wanted to go to our school because I grew up around our school all the time. And so I'd go to school, have to do good in school because get my ass whooped by my dad if I didn't do good, right? Get out of school, do whether it was stay after school, do sports, whatever, go to work, right? Because I had to work at my dad's stores. Go to work, stay there till late at night. I had to go to his office and do my homework. Then the rest of the day I had to do work, go home, have dinner, do it all over again the next day. I mean, that was my life. I mean, there was not like you had chores, you had things to do. I mean, there was no like in between. I mean, weekends were cool, right? Because we had a roller rink right in front of our store. So, dude, I was a skate master. Remember the roller rink?
Remember that? Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
turned into a pawn shop.
yeah, it's a pawn shop now. But
it's pawn shop.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? That's the thing. And here's the thing. I remember that roller rink, right? I would go over there and I do something bad or whatever, bro. They would rat on me like so quickly. There was these twins, Cora and Dora, greatest, beautiful girls, redheads, and they would go there rat at me, bro. I thought you guys were my friends. They'd go over there rat at me right away, like no sweat. But again, this happens because you're in a small town. Like there was a restaurant next door. My dad didn't know this, so like every Friday. But I had a tab next door, bro. I'd go over there and order burritos, order food. I just tell them right on a tab. And come Friday, they come charge my dad. My dad's like, where's this from? And it's like, Junior over there. I'm like, all right, I got to eat. You know what I mean? But it's just like, but I'm sure like where you lived, because I know exactly where you lived, everyone knew you and your family, right?
Oh, yeah.
And why don't you tell us the little difference in the community for you? And you know what I'm talking about, because tell me a little bit about that and how that is different in today's society.
So the area that I was in was just north of where Joe was at, and the so we were talking about earlier, the school was primarily probably white folks, but you know what? I don't know. It seemed like it was more of a 50-50 thing between,
But
there
here's
was
the
probably
thing:
more.
we didn't look at color, bro.
Yeah,
We
never
looked
did.
at we
didn't.
looked at the stoners. We looked
Yeah.
at the jocks.
And-
we looked
and
at
there was, that's right, man. There was white dudes and black dudes and Mexican guys that were stoners, and there were
the emu kids, right? The emu kids,
oh
and
yeah, what the heck?
what were they called back then?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of that. Where they were all black and
Yeah.
painted their face
Yeah.
white.
Yeah.
But you know what? There was a couple of the girls that were in band with me that did that. What? Like not emo. What the heck?
It was
Goth. That's what it was.
Goth. Yeah.
And they were so cool. And I had one of them for class, and she was really. In fact, I think she became a teacher after school and everything. But so the neighborhood I was in, there actually wasn't a lot of white families.
it was known
grew
for its violence. It was a gang ridded community.
It was called, it was called Northside. And what was funny is that a lot of the kids that were like gangsters or whatever you wanted to call them, and it was a whole different thing back then. But and there was there was a few people doing the graffiti thing, but it wasn't as big as was later on and is now.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, my dad drove a truck for a living, and he knew a lot of the guys in the area because they were truck drivers or they worked on docks and all that kind of stuff. So, like any of those kids would come by, and I remember because my dad would always be in the garage, and and all of us kids all rode BMX bikes around the neighborhood and everything.
Stolen.
And the stolen was mine never was. I had one get stolen once. But I remember kids like would come up to my dad and be like, "Hey, can you feel the tires up in my bike?" Because he had a air pump, and a lot of compressor, and a lot of the dads didn't. A lot of them were struggling and trying to do all they could. And one of the things, kind of going back on the thing with getting good grades and everything, I think there was a different mentality for us too, because of the way we were raised with our parents. So you had that fear, right? Like the fear of God. You had the fear of your parents that
absolutely,
I'm going to get my butt beat. But here's the other thing. This followed me through my life too, because at the time, like my dad's passed away, but he was alive at the time, obviously. And then my grandparents were alive. And I, more than fear of like getting my butt beat, I always had a fear of disappointing them.
Yeah.
And nowadays that's probably one of the big ones for me is I feel that kids do not care what their parents think.
They don't respect their parents.
Zero respect. Well, if they don't respect teachers, police officers, and listen, you can have a bad teacher that, you need to go to somebody else and tell them, hey, this teacher's not cool. Like they touched me funny or whatever,
Yeah. I never had that experience. I wish so much I did.
Yeah. I had an English teacher. I wish. But yeah. So, and same thing, police officer that, 90% or 95% plus of your police officers are doing a good job. The ones that aren't, you need to report them, don't be disrespectful to the other 95 and the teachers.
But they lived amongst us as well. Remember that?
Well,
the police, everybody was like, it was one big community.
The kid down on the corner, his dad, I remember he worked for the, I don't remember if it was the sheriff's or the police department, but he was a police officer. So, because, I was a kid, sheriff's, police, they were all the same at that time. He might have even been, he wasn't highway patrol. He was one of the other two, but, that whole neighborhood, I mean, we had a park that we would take the bus from, and there was a mix of kids over there. My buddy that who I'm talking about that was black, he lived like 2 streets up from me, and him and I palled around all the time, like from kindergarten, man. We started hanging out. But
you honestly, in that area, you were the minority.
Yeah,
you were the minority. You really were.
There wasn't many of us.
No,
man.
there wasn't hardly any.
White,
you stuck out.
The whiteys were,
bro.
Not.
You were honestly, you were like the Q-tip in the middle of the mud. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's
You
a
know,
good
yeah,
description.
bro, you were. I'm like, damn. I mean, it's like even now, because people in our small town, people didn't move away. People like the next generation kept the
No,
homes or whatever the
that's
case
right.
is. They never went away. And like I was saying, we never looked at our friends like as color. We looked at them as like
No,
the group they belonged to. Like
never.
you would never think that in middle school I was that little Mexican white boy that wore the Ralph Lauren polo button down shirt with jeans that would go play Dungeons and Dragons in the library. You know what I mean?
Oh,
That
yeah.
was me, bro. Remember that? That was me.
Yeah, that's so funny.
But that is just how we grew up. We didn't grow up based on our color. We grew up around based on what
Oh,
we
no.
did or we liked to do, whether it was hang on a library, play D&D, or whether it was play sports, or whether we dressed like goth, or we like to, because there was a smoking section, remember, in the senior
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the senior quad.
Yeah, there was
yeah.
the smoking. If you were a smoker, stoner dude, or if you were, if you were the rocker with the long hair, you know what I mean?
I had long hair.
You did. So whatever group it was, I mean, everyone got along. It was funny back, like you mentioned about the gangs. That we had quite a bit in ours. We had the South Side, the North Side, the PW side. You know what I mean?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So, but you know what's funny? They never messed with anybody that wasn't part of those communities. They only messed with each other.
Oh, no.
They never messed with it. They would say,
Yeah.
they'd be down walking the halls like in their cholo ways and be like, "What's up?" Be like, "Hey, what's up, man?" No, that was it, right? They wouldn't pick a fight, nothing, man. It was so different back then because people, as much as they didn't respect each other in those rival gangs, they respected, period. They respected people. They respected people that weren't part of that group, and I think that's what we've lost, that whole respect. And I think that's, you hit the nail on the head with that, is that we've lost respect. Like, it was funny growing up, my kid, I never forget this, my oldest boy, I never let my kids go to people's house to spend a night. I was one of those parents. I didn't like that. And it just, I don't know the parents. I don't know what their habits are. I don't know if they walk around in their underwear. I don't, all these questions as a parent, all these things come to your mind, right? And you're like, I'm not going to risk that. Just stay home. They could spend the night here, And so, of course, my ex-wife convinced me one day. You're like, you got to stop being that way, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right. So he went to this friend's house, and he's a little white kid, right? And he comes back the next day, bro, and he was just,
I can't even imagine.
Oh man, I'm like, hey, what's going on, buddy? He's yeah, I don't think I want to stay the night over there. I go, oh, what happened? he's all, man, my friend, like his mom called us to eat dinner, and he just like yelled at her, like, we're up here playing a game. I'm yelling, and I'm like, huh?
Whoa.
Really? I go, yeah, Dad. I've never. Dad. I go, what do you think would happen if you did that? Oh, Dad, I would have been picking my teeth up from across the room. I'm like, yeah, probably would, boy. But it was so funny that stuck to my head to think. I'm like, and I told my wife then, I'm like, this is why I don't let them spend the night at people's house. They come back all corrupt, and next thing you know, he's gonna be yelling at me, and I'm gonna have to put a little smack attack. You know what I mean? But
that little kid is probably in Antifa and voted for our current president.
Yeah, so you're not right. No, not my kid. The little other kid. The other kid.
Yeah,
guys.
the little other kid. Yeah.
But see, those are the things that have changed. Like in the community I lived, I was surrounded by law enforcement and corrections and all kinds of things. We watched out for each other, man. Everyone, the neighbors' doors, and this is even when us even being as an adult. Like someone left the garage door open, I'd go over, close it, because you know how we do, right? Hit the button, you jump over the invisible beam and hit your head on the door coming down and knock yourself out. But we took care of each other, So we saw someone's car had left open, we shut the door, we call them. Everyone knew each other's numbers. I remember growing up when we were just moving into our ranch where we lived. We taken all these things over there. We started moving around. My dad started moving, put everything over there. I was a little kid. So we went the next day, our lawnmowers were gone. All lawnmowers, all kinds of equipment was gone. And we're like, damn, we just moved here. We got robbed, because it was out in the boonies. Along comes this neighbor. He's all, hey, neighbor, blah, blah. Hey, man, these guys, they try to steal your stuff. We got them. Beat the crap out of them. We got all your stuff. It's in our house. Dude, I'm like, what? My dad couldn't believe it. He's like, oh, my God. So
try that in a small town.
you know, and these guys were riffraffs. They were just
Pow.
they were coming out. They were driving out to the middle of nowhere where there's houses, and they saw this house that was no one there, and they just went to rob it, right? But the neighbors who are farmers, we mess around with farmers, bro, down in California.
Yeah.
They don't mess around, and they beat the crap out of them, bro. And they took all our stuff, and then when we got there, they brought them all back to us. And I'm gonna tell you something, Jay. In that I remember that house that we lived in, I grew up in. Our door was never locked. Our back gate was never locked. The kids and the kids in the community would come and go swimming. You know, they come swimming at our house because we were the only family that had a swimming pool in the middle of farmland, right? And my mom would make food for them. They'd go eat, and you know, they love coming over there, and like, but we all got along. I'd walk in people's houses like it's my own, you know, and you'd grab food, and they didn't care. And they knew your parents. And you know, bro, being Mexican, you got a lot of issues, right? Because you know the parents, when they hand you over to somebody like to babysit or whatever, they hand your booty next to it. They give them their booty. Like if you miss that, whip his ass. You know, and that's like an ongoing. They did that in middle school. My dad signed that damn paper to get us.
Oh, the paddle,
the paddle, bro. I'm like, are you kidding me? So not only am I going to get it at school, I was going to get it at home. When I got home, my dad was going to beat me too. So I'm like, that's double jeopardy, bro. It's against the law somewhere. But anyway, we walk in people's house like nothing, man. We built tree houses in trees. We did. Where else would you build a tree house? Right? That's kind of stupid. I said that, but anyway, so we built tree houses
in a cactus.
But we did. You know, we everyone got along, and everybody's like, and if something happened to a neighbor, everybody was there, right?
Yeah.
We had a neighbor who's they got hit by a car or something like that. And what happened? They're like, the kids. They told my mom, could you watch it? My mom's like, we'll watch the kids. So you go to the ambulance with them. Dude, we got the kids. We took them, you know, I tortured them, but we kept them. We took them. But that's what small towns did. That's what communities did, you know, even in where we lived in the city, we did that. Like people would come to my dad's store and steal, bro. Guess what? They'd be coming right back because somebody else that saw them came right back.
That's right.
And brought them, and of course we get our stuff back after a little beat down. But everybody looked out for each other. What a story! My dad was a big advocate of illegal aliens. Right? He back then, I don't know if you remember when the Border Patrol had those Chevy Blazers. They treated illegals very bad. They would grab them and throw them in the back of the truck like they were dogs, and they were horrible. They'd beat them down. There was no rules. You know, I'm all for building the wall, but there's humanity. You got to, you know, whatever. So my dad would. My dad would always fight for them, and he'd fight with the Border Patrol and say, you can't be doing that, blah, blah. So they took his ass one day. They're like, oh, you want to? All right, let's go. And they took him. And so my mom was there by herself. She didn't know what to do. She wanted to leave. Well, those twins that I was telling you about earlier from across the street, the roller rink, Cora and Dora.
Cora and Dora.
Yeah, they came over, bro. They took over cashiering and running the store while my mom took off.
Wow.
The community came together to help out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stuff like that. You don't see that anymore. You know, you'll see it here and there, but it's usually older people that you see that happening from. It's just society as a whole has changed so much, bro. That things have happened so much that we are I saw this advocate, and of course it's for the left, right? And they don't get off that racist train, and they're talking about, you know, the white supremacy and white privilege and blah blah blah. And what do you think they were spewing? They're saying we need to divide and conquer. These are what these lefty and Tifa people are saying, bro.
Yeah.
So what do you think is happening today?
Everything's being divided by the lowest common denominator. You know, I mean, it wasn't so. Everything is a division platform, right? I mean, you know, we take like schools, we've come full circle, and you start off early by teaching kids, well, you don't like the other school, but then they get into the same school, so now they're friends where they used to be enemies, but now you don't like another school. So, and then once you go to the college, now you're friends, but now you don't like the other college, and we don't like sports teams in other states. We don't like other states, you know, and we've divided the country into a red and blue, right?
Yeah.
Left and right, Republican, Democrat, whatever you want to say. All the independents are yelling right now. How about us back here?
What's their
the
color?
Green Party and I think
Independent.
yellow.
Independence yellow?
I think it's yellow. Yeah, and I think, and then the Green Party's green, of course, but
Mauve.
um, and then I mean, there's so many different little micro parties. Somebody's going to be stupid and bring the wig party back eventually.
Oh, they should come back. I think.
Right. I want to wear a powdered wig eventually. But so now let's say the country is split 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good enough. Now you have to split within those 50-50s. You have to split everybody by race and color, and then by religion, and then by sexual orientation, and then by what you think you want to be called, and just keep chipping away until you've just got all these pieces everywhere. The thing is how do you, so you're a king, right? Or a dictator, whatever you want to say, and go back way back in time when there wasn't guns, there wasn't any of that kind of stuff. And you were living in kind of not a castle, but a fortress of some sort. And you had two groups of people coming up. You had a bunch with pitchforks and a bunch with torches, and they're all marching towards you. And your advisor, you say, how do we stop them? And the advisor says, well, you get the guys with pitchforks to believe that the guys with torches want to take their pitchforks and vice versa. And that's how all this stuff starts. And there's so much division making in politics, in media, in social media. I mean, look at posts and go through, read comments. Man, it's crazy how divisive the comments become really quickly on the most basic of things, And you mentioned something earlier about like doors not being left open.
Yeah.
I remember my grandparents' house. I didn't even know they had a lock on their door. Dude, my mom would drop me off there, or we would go over, or I just like, I remember specifically like on Halloween and stuff like that. I'm in a mask and and I just walk right in the house and they're like, who's this? And walk in the house and
it's Casper.
Nobody. Yeah. Right. And it was me, of course, but they didn't know that, but their door wasn't locked because it wasn't something anybody worried about or thought of. And it, years later is when stuff like that started happening. And when it started happening, when people started becoming divided, and when there was issues between races and all that kind of stuff. And it's just back to that old tribalism thing. But yeah, I am really proud that, we had the opportunity, man, to grow up, how we did, where we did. What's that?
We were lucky.
Oh,
to grow up when we did. I think, and I lucked out in raising my kids still in that, having that, that era in them. You know what I mean? We all could have been better fathers, but I think my kids I'm very fortunate to have my children, and they're not like some of them are today.
Oh, yeah, they didn't turn into complete psychos. Well, as any parent, and this is anybody, if I could go back in time, I'd change this about what I did in my life. And, as a parent, I did a good job, but I would have changed these things about being with my kids, and, I mean, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but yeah, we were very fortunate, and it's too bad that, towns and cities and suburbs and urban areas, whatever you want to say, have really, turned for the worst. And I'd say the one thing for folks that are listening, if you want to raise your kids somewhere decent, get out of big cities. Yeah. Big cities are, it doesn't matter where it's at. Your state, my state, the state we were in is falling apart. But all the biggest cities in every state, every biggest city in every state is just a dumpster fire. They all are. Wow. And there's a pretty common denominator reason between all of those states why they're, or those cities, why they're like that. And, if I have to say it, then, and you don't get what I'm trying to get at, then you've been blinded by the system. Yeah. It's pretty easy to just look it up, look at statistics, figure out, the top worst cities in the country, you might have one that blips off to the other side or what have you, but for the most part, it's the same common denominators between, these failed cities, failed programs, just everything. The politics in it is just the worst. And when we were kids, there really wasn't we knew about politics, but it wasn't really a thing because the presidents or the mayors or whatever, they might have ran slightly right of center or slightly left of center or whatever, but everybody kind of came back to center.
They weren't far off the opposite direction.
No, there was no extremists. And now, I mean, the people that are on the super extreme right and super extreme left, it gets kind of crazy, what people are thinking. And what's sad is being just a standard conservative, or like for folks on the left, classical liberals, I mean, they are basically looked at as fascists now at this point.
Yeah.
By the super hardcore left, because they look at classic. You take like Dave Rubin, he's still to this day, even though he talks a little bit more about kind of things that run over to the conservative values side of things, he's still a classical liberal. And I respect the heck out of that. I really do, because he still believes in what he believes in. He believes in the things that he's passionate about and everything. But he's realized that those people way far left, they're crazy. They really are. And
that's on both sides of the spectrum. That's on both sides of the spectrum.
It's super on both sides. I mean, I said this, and this is getting away a little bit from the whole small town thing, but the whole thing that happened on January 6th, I've said this to a bunch of people. There was not a single conservative there. So let me take that back. There wasn't a single conservative that went into the Capitol building that quote unquote broke in. You can debate all day whether they were let in, they broke in, whatever. It doesn't matter. There was no conservatives there. Were there maybe Trump supporters? Absolutely. Were there Republicans? Absolutely. Were there people planted by the FBI? Who knows? Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Capitol Police, but there weren't conservatives. Because let me tell you something. People that are conservative won't do that. And if they say they are and they did that, then they're not conservative. Yeah. So when you believe in what you believe in, and you have a good passion for the good and for the right, and believing that people should have the right to, have their own opinion and say their own thing. And that's the way we were brought up. Yep. I mean, in the town we were in, like we said in the beginning of this, it was never about color or, some of us, were less fortunate. I mean,
race is taught, bro. Race is taught.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Two little babies of different color, different speech, religion, whatever. They don't know that until they are told that.
Yeah.
Until they are told to be.
I think if we just could take a little bit of that small town mentality, small town attitude into the city, that'd be great. I think the difference is that in a small town, you're almost forced to know your neighbor, to get to know your neighbor, to help them. And then when you start talking to people, here's the thing. When you start talking to people that you don't know, you start liking things about them. And before you know it, you become friends. And before you know it, you're neighbors, right? And I don't mean in a physical way, but in a biblical way, because it's, love thy neighbor, right?
Right.
And I think that's important. And we've gone away from that. So final verdict, Jason Aldean, try that in a small town. Do you believe it? You think they're going to get a whooping if they try anything like that in a small town?
I do believe it. I think when we were youngsters, and even if it was kids from the PW, like you said earlier, and somebody from North Side or whatever, they weren't. But if somebody came from out of town and started stuff, I guarantee you, those guys would have joined up and 100%.
Oh yeah.
Been against the people that were coming from out of town trying to start something 100%.
Yeah.
Because all of those people, even though they weren't, super cohesive with one another, they loved where they lived, and they were proud of where they lived.
Yeah.
And the thing is a lot of those folks, you lived on South Side and North Side. I was a North Sider, and if some of the guys that were there, they didn't like guys on the South Side. But, however, their aunt or grandmother or somebody lived down there, and they would protect them,
Yeah.
with everything.
I was from the deep
Yeah.
south. I wasn't from the south side. I was from the deep south.
Deep South.
Yeah.
The deep South side.
Yeah.
Well, listen, everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. I'm Jay, and that's Joe, and this has been Joe and Jay Outspoken. If you had fun or learned anything, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment, and share. If there's a topic you would like to see us cover in the future, let us know at joeandjayproductions.com/ideas. If you would like to help the cause, it can be as small as liking, subscribing, and commenting. You can also grab merch from the Outspoken store or become one of our Patreon members. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Take care of one another.
And remember, do better, be better.
And as always,
God bless America.
America.